Hello YouTube and welcome to Prime Productions. I'm here to help enhance your tabletop gaming experience. If you're new to this channel, I primarily cover Paizo tabletop role-playing games like Pathfinder and Starfinder. So, a couple of times on this channel I've mentioned building switch hitter characters, and I've gotten some pushback on it, so I want to take a second to step back and talk about them for a bit and explain my stance on them and where I'm coming from. By the way, this isn't a video saying I'm right and whoever else is wrong. I'm not trying to attack anyone. I just feel that there's a miscommunication and I want to clear it up. If at the end of this video you still don't like switch hitter builds, that's fine, you're free to disagree. Let's just keep things civil in the comments, yeah? So let's start off with, what is a switch hitter build in Pathfinder 2e? Well, as far as I'm concerned, switch hitters are characters that are competent in both melee and ranged combat. And just to define our terms so everyone is on the same page, we are defining melee combat as someone who is specialized to attack at close range with like swords and stuff, and a ranged combatant is someone who specializes to do well with distance attacks like with bows and crossbows. A switch hitter is then defined as a character who can do decently well at both. A lot of pushback people have with switch hitter builds is that they will be less effective than someone who specializes fully into being either melee or ranged, and that's true. That's actually good game design. If someone can build a character who is just as good at ranged and melee combat as a dedicated ranged or dedicated melee character, then there would be no reason to ever build a dedicated melee or ranged character. Under that system, no one would ever build a knight because they would be intentionally hamstringing themselves. The thing is, though, switch hitters aren't useless just because they aren't the pinnacle of their particular form of combat. A switch hitter gives up a little bit of top-end power in order to have a lot more versatility. A ranged character backed into a corner of a dungeon is probably not going to do very well, and a knight with no ranged option is going to do even worse against flying enemies raining down fire. Not so for the switch hitter. They may do slightly less well than either a ranged or melee character when those characters are in their element, but they're going to do a lot better when those characters are out of them. It's all a game of trade-offs, and you have to decide if the trade-off is worth it. Anyway, that's where I'm coming from. So now that you know my stance, let's take a look at what I would say are some strong switch hitter builds. Just to be clear, these are not the only switch hitter builds that would do well in combat, just a few examples. Also, these won't be in-depth builds, just general overviews. And for these example characters, I'm going to have their level 1 ability scores down here at the bottom of the screen. I won't call them out specifically though. The numbers are just what I would do so you can follow along at home if you want. To get things started, I want to throw out an honorable mention for a switch hitter of a druid. They get medium armor proficiency, start with shield block so they can have a sturdy shield, and can run around casting spells like ignition in both melee and ranged combat. Nice little build. But let's get started in earnest with some less spellcastery switch hitter characters. The first one is a thrown weapon character who is primarily melee focused but has a decent ranged option. Now, the ancestry could be one of several, but let's go with Minotaur, who are normally large size, but I will go with the Little Horn Minotaur heritage to bring them down to medium size so that they can fit in those 5-foot wide corridors that all dungeons seem to have. For the first level ancestry feat, any could work, but personally I'd go for Pantheon magic, which gets him a free divine cantrip. This could be Rousing Splash to give him some temporary HP if he knows a fight is coming. For background, I'd go with Sailor to net our guy the Athletics skill, Sailing Lore skill, and Underwater Marauder skill feat. Many other backgrounds would work, but this one is thematic and gets us what we need. For class, I would go with Fighter. They don't get a subclass, but do get a first level class feat, and I would pick up Point Blank Stance so that he can do some extra damage when throwing his weapon. Now the thing about a fighter is they start off with expert in all simple and martial weapons, so even with a dexterity of +3, this guy is still more accurate with ranged weapons than say a level 1 rogue with +4 dexterity and a short bow. So he'll be slightly better in melee than at range, but he's still going to be pretty accurate with both. And as for weapons, I'm going to recommend a harpoon. This D8 throwing weapon has the tethered trait, meaning he can yeet it at an enemy and then yank it back as an action. This lets him do range pretty well until he can get a returning rune on his weapon. And there you go, a person who's pretty darn good at melee, still decent at range. Side note, you could do this build with a D6 one-handed war javelin. The build is slightly different, I'll explain it on screen now so you can pause the video and read if you're interested. Obviously this build is more defense focused with a sturdy shield and all, but honestly, D6 versus like the D8 of a harpoon isn't that bad. The next build is also a thrown weapon build. Unlike the fighter though, this build is going to be equally good in both melee and ranged. Now, for this build I want to go human so that I can grab the human ancestry feat unconventional weaponry. This lets her pick up the Tamshil Chakram, an advanced uncommon weapon, though with the feat she'll treat it as a martial weapon. Now, she won't be using the Tamshil Chakram for the first few levels, but we will get there. Again, background isn't hugely important, but how about Saloon Entertainer? That nets her the attributes we need, the performance skill, any lore skill we want, and the Virtuosic Performer skill feat, which helps if she goes into Battle Dancer. And if Battle Dancer didn't give it away, yeah, the class we're going for is Swashbuckler in this one. Now, the type of Swashbuckler isn't hugely important, though to get the most bang for your buck, I'd go with Braggart, Wit, or Battle Dancer, as those have the easiest time generating panache at range. And make sure to grab the first level Swashbuckler feat Flying Blade, which lets her use her Swashbuckler stuff at range as long as she's using a finesse or agile throwing weapon and is in the first range increment. Then she can start off with the Combat Grapnel, a two-handed finesse weapon that has the tethered trait so she can chuck it at people and reel it back. Then as soon as she gets to a high enough level to afford a returning rune, she can swap out the Combat Grapnel for a Tamshil Chakram. Tamshil Chakram is great because it has the Deadly D6 and Agile traits. And if she doesn't have a returning rune by level 4, she can grab the Swashbuckler feat Twirling Throw, which is a finisher. This lets her thrown weapons return to her hand after being thrown, even if she misses, but not if she critically misses. The third and final build we are going to look at today is Gunslinger. In particular, a Drifter Gunslinger who are specialized to have a melee weapon in one hand and a firearm in the other. Now there are a few ways to do a Drifter Gunslinger, but I'm going to go Dwarf for fun. For Heritage, pick your favorite. I'm fond of the Death Warden Dwarf, but that's just me. For Ancestry feat, I'd pick Clan Pistol, which gives you a Clan Pistol for free at level 1. You normally cannot buy these, and there are a few other ways to gain access to them, like unconventional weaponry, but the Dwarf feat gives you one for free, so you can start using this build right off the bat, because the Clan Pistol is pretty expensive even if you have access to it. If you really don't want to do the Clan Pistol thing though, you can use a Dueling Pistol, which is pretty close. For background, pick your favorite, maybe Gunsmith. Gunsmith seems appropriate. That grants him the crafting and engineering lore skills and the quick repair skill feat. For class, like I said, he is going to go Gunslinger, specifically Drifter Gunslinger. The big thing about this way, or Gunslinger subclass, is that they wade into battle gun in one hand and melee weapon in the other. Now, as of the new Guns and Gears Remastered book, Gunslingers use their firearm proficiency, which remember gets up to Legendary, with combination weapons that are at least half firearm or crossbow, even if they're not in firearm mode. That means a Drifter Gunslinger could dual wield a Trigger Brand, which is a short sword with a gun in it, and their Dwarven Clan Pistol at the same time. Both weapons use the Gunslinger's firearm proficiency and dexterity to hit, so that Gunslinger is going to be pretty darn accurate. Now, our Gunslinger will need to reload their gun even when their hands are full. The Drifter's Way kinda gives them an option to do this if they can make a melee strike, but what if they aren't near someone to strike so that they can reload? For this reason, I'd grab the first level feat Dual Weapon Reload, which lets them reload a weapon even if their offhand has a melee weapon in it. And that's it. Those are just some options for switch hitter builds in Pathfinder 2e. Do you have other ideas for characters that would be good in both melee and at range? If so, let me know in the comments below. Just try to be civil, guys. And as a reminder, I do make my own third-party content. I just released the Civilian NPC Omnibus, a downloadable PDF at drivethrurpg.com. This book has 44 new stat blocks from NPC levels of -1 to 10. This time, most of them are themed around civilians you might encounter, from serfs to guildmasters. Check it out in the description below. It's the same price as if you had bought me a cup of coffee from Starbucks, and it would go a long way towards making this channel more financially viable for me. Anyway, that's all for today. If you enjoyed the content, please leave a like and subscribe below. That lets me, as well as YouTube, know that you like this kind of content and would like to see more. And until next time, thank you, good luck, and happy gaming!